Pratt ordered that their hair be cut and that they be given military uniforms. Pratt also ordered that the Indian prisoners of war at Fort Marion be given ledger books to draw in. One Southern Cheyenne man named Howling Wolf took to it best because he'd been doing the same thing on buffalo hides to tell stories long before that. In the ledger books, he drew things from way back and high up, a bird's eye view. That hadn't happened before the same way on the hides. It was only after that long train ride from Oklahoma to Florida with iron chains around his wrists and ankles that Howling Wolf began to draw from where birds saw things. Birds see the best of any creature with a spine, are sacred because they soar the heavens, and with just one of their feathers and some smoke, prayers make it to God. The Indians were allowed to sell their drawings to white people who came to witness the prisoners of war. These Kiowa, Comanche, Southern Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Caddo people, to see them dance and dress up Indian, see the vanishing race before it was gone, and to take home a drawing, a polished sea bean, or a bow and arrow, curios they were called, as if a souvenir from an amusement park or human zoo, which were popular at the time and tended to include Indians. Drawings of Indian life as depicted by Indians on pages made to keep track of transactions were sold as some of the first Indian art. Pratt drew from his experience at the prison castle as if it were a blueprint for the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, which opened just a year after the prisoners were released. Starting in 1879, Indian parents were encouraged and coerced and threatened with jail time if they refused to send their children to school. In one case, Hopi parents from Arizona who had refused such orders were sent to California, to Alcatraz, for 9 months as punishment. The prisoners were stripped of their clothes and given military uniforms, told they'd be there until they learned beyond a shadow of a doubt the error of their evil ways. They were held in wooden boxes smaller than solitary confinement cells built later for the famously draconian prison. During the day, they were made to saw large logs into smaller ones like some cartoon's dream of sleeping. When they were released and taken back to Arizona, they continued to resist having their children put into schools and continued to spend time in prison. Some Indian parents understood that their children were hostages kept to encourage better behavior from the more problematic Indian tribes. Others were forcefully taken from their homes on what some Indians then called the Iron Horse, on loud trains across unknown lands, to a school where they were subjected to disease and starvation and taught that everything about being Indian was wrong. It became law that Indian children attend these schools, just as Indian medicines and ceremonies, rites, and rituals were being outlawed. At Carlisle, they were taught that they were to become Carlisle Indians, a new tribe of Indians made up of many tribes but belonging to none, belonging to the school, which belonged to and was funded by the U.S. government. As soon as they arrived at the school, their long hair was cut, their clothes were taken, and new names were handed out along with military uniforms, which is to say the war began immediately. Each day they did military drills and marched as if against themselves in daily battles happening first from the outside in and then from the inside out like a disease. If Indian children spoke English instead of their native tongues, they were rewarded at first, but being rewarded for not doing Indian things was not where it ended. Beatings and jail time and countless other kinds of abuse became routine. You were supposed to kill the entire Indian if they were to be saved. Later, it was said that Indian children in boarding schools had the same chance of dying as soldiers in one of the world wars. All the Indian children who were ever Indian children never stopped being Indian children and went on to have not nits but Indian children, whose Indian children went on to have Indian children, whose Indian children became American Indians, whose American Indian children became Native Americans, whose Native American children would call themselves natives or indigenous or NDNS or the names of their sovereign nations or the names of their tribes, and all too often would be told they weren't the right kind of Indians to be considered real ones by too many Americans taught in schools their whole lives that the only real kinds of Indians were those long-gone Thanksgiving Indians who loved the Pilgrims as if to death.